Launching a rocket is always risky, yet in 1986, NASA was so confident everything would run smoothly, so much so they encouraged the entire nation to watch it live. But instead, what people were about to witness was nothing short of unthinkable. Millions of Americans tuned in to see the liftoff. Children were told they would be witnessing history. You see, NASA had sent astronauts into orbit many times before, but this mission was different. For the very first time ever, a teacher was joining the crew. Her name was Krista, and she was a high school educator from New Hampshire.
I still can't believe that I'm going to actually be going into that shuttle.
She wasn't just chosen at random either.
Nearly 12,000 teachers from all across the country had applied to NASA. Only 114 of them, less than 1%, were selected to continue in the competition.
Krista was set to become the first American civilian in space, and because of that, NASA turned her flight into a major national event. She gave interviews, posed for photographs, and responded to endless questions. But the one question everyone kept asking was whether she truly felt safe.
Space flight today really seems safe. We had a good example of that when NASA shut down the last one through the computer because one of the backup systems wasn't working.
Everything seemed ready, but the night before the launch, the weather shifted suddenly. Temperatures at the launch site dropped below freezing, which left some engineers deeply concerned. They warned the cold could harm parts of the shuttle, especially the rocket boosters, and if it did, the results would be catastrophic. The engineers advised NASA to postpone, but the agency hesitated. The pressure was enormous. Millions were preparing to watch live, and the mission had already been delayed 4 times before. First, a scheduling conflict, then a dust storm, then poor weather, then a technical issue with the hatch, and they knew that canceling yet again would be humiliating. Within NASA, the issue became an argument. One person even accused the engineers of exaggerating weak evidence to delay the launch. Ultimately, officials decided to press ahead. But little did they know that that choice would haunt them and everyone watching on TV for decades to come. It was January 28, 1986, the day of launch. That morning, 7 crew members climbed aboard, 6 astronauts, and 1 teacher. The shuttle was called the Challenger.
Let's go down to the Kennedy Space Center and take a look at Challenger sitting on the pad.
At 11:38 a.m., Challenger broke free from the launch pad.
We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff.
Right away, a small gray puff of smoke came from the side of the right booster, near where it was attached to the shuttle. To the untrained eye, it looked like nothing, but in reality, it was the first clue of a serious problem. The seals inside the booster weren't holding properly. For a brief moment, burning gas escaped through the gap. Strangely, the smoke stopped just seconds later. In truth, however, bits of the booster's fuel had melted and temporarily plugged the gap. For about half a minute, Challenger seemed fine. But 36 seconds after liftoff, it hit a patch of rough winds. The shuttle automatically corrected its path, tilting slightly to stay steady. But that tiny adjustment shook things inside the booster, knocking loose the makeshift plug that had been covering the gap. And just like that, the weakness was back. Challenger was only 9,800 feet above the ground when smoke began leaking again. By 58 seconds, the problem was visible once more. A jet of flame coming from the side of the right booster. 2 seconds later, it touched the giant external fuel tank, and within moments, a hole was burning into it. Hydrogen, one of the most flammable substances on Earth, began leaking into the open air. Still, inside the shuttle, the crew had no idea what was happening. Mission Control gave them routine instructions, like asking the crew to throttle up, and so the astronauts adjusted their engines and kept climbing. But Challenger was now in its death spiral. At 72 seconds, pressure inside the fuel tank began to collapse. Just 1 second later, the bottom of the tank broke apart. The right booster twisted free from its strut, and the shuttle began ripping itself apart in midair. At 73 seconds, Challenger was gone. The entire stack, the shuttle, the fuel tank, and the boosters disintegrated in a massive fireball nearly 50,000 feet above the Atlantic. Debris scattered in all directions as the pieces tumbled toward the ocean. The shuttle's crew cabin, however, stayed mostly intact. The force of the breakup threw it clear, and for the next 2 minutes and 45 seconds, it fell through the sky. The astronauts inside endured forces between 12 and 20 times the pull of gravity, enough to knock them unconscious instantly, though the cabin itself held together until it slammed into the Atlantic Ocean. At 89 seconds after liftoff, Mission Control saw the full weight of the disaster. Steve Nesbitt, NASA's public affairs officer, announced that the shuttle had exploded. Recovery ships were dispatched immediately, but debris still falling out of the sky delayed efforts. With the estimated forces on the crew compartment at 200 times the force of gravity, survival was virtually impossible. Over the following days, parts of Challenger were recovered from the ocean, and the crew compartment was found on March 7, 1986. The astronauts' remains were removed by April 4th, though one body, Gregory Jarvis, had drifted away from the compartment and was recovered a week later. Even decades after the disaster, pieces of the shuttle still washed ashore, a lasting reminder of the tragedy that shook the nation and changed American spaceflight forever. It was March 3, 1989, in Berkeley County, South Carolina. 5-year-old Justin Turner left his home early in the morning, heading toward his usual bus stop to board his school bus. It was the kind of quiet neighborhood where kids walked to their bus stops on their own, a routine so ordinary that no one thought twice about it. His stepmother, Megan Turner, who normally walked with him, was occupied in the shower, while his father, Victor Turner, had already left for work, leaving little Justin to make the short walk all by himself. Later, Megan would wait for the school bus at the end of the day, but when it arrived, Justin never got off. In fact, according to both the bus driver and the neighbors, he hadn't even made it onto the bus that morning. That night, Justin was reported missing, and a search for the young boy immediately began. By the third day of the search, the effort had grown to its largest size. Volunteers from the local community joined law enforcement in combing the area, accompanied by a camera crew from the local Channel 2 station. All of them held on to the hope that Justin would be safely located, and so they were off. Some focused on the nearby woods, while others, including family members, scoured the property and neighboring land. This meant checking sheds, piles of trash, and every area where a small child could possibly hide. The day was expected to be long and grueling, though in the end, all it took was a few minutes.
Something's in there.
Nathan, that's
No camera, no camera. Where's he at? Where's he at? Everybody stand back. Everybody stand back.
As cameras rolled, Victor Turner was shown discovering his son hidden inside an old cabinet within their camper. His reaction made one thing painfully clear: Justin was no longer alive. The situation was made worse upon the discovery that not only was Justin dead, but he had been savagely battered and strangled. The footage was devastating, made worse by the realization that the camper had already been searched numerous times in the preceding days. Somehow, Justin's body had gone unnoticed, suggesting the killer may have placed him there after the initial searches. The news of Justin's fate sent shockwaves through the neighborhood.
The latest word about the boy's grim fate has really shaken up this Moncks Corner neighborhood.
Everyone understood that a dangerous and deranged individual was involved, and finding the person responsible became law enforcement's top priority. Yet, the search faced enormous challenges. Very little physical evidence was left at the scene, making it extremely hard to figure out exactly who committed the crime. Investigators struggled with almost no concrete leads, and over time, the case went cold. Years passed, and then decades, and Justin Turner's disappearance seemed destined to remain unsolved. Until...
Breaking news this afternoon out of Berkeley County, as the Berkeley County Sheriff's Office has made 2 arrests in the Justin Turner case.
Yesterday, Justin's father, Victor Lee Turner, seen here, arrested at his home in Cross Hill, South Carolina. Turner's wife and Justin's stepmother, Megan R. Turner, also arrested. Both of them charged with murder.
35 long years after Justin's lifeless body was found, it would be the very same man who had found him who was charged with his murder. The arrests reportedly came thanks to improvements in forensic technology, as well as new information that had previously gone unreported. Like one example where Megan Turner, the stepmother of the child, was overheard discussing how she and Justin had gotten into a fight that very morning, with the woman reportedly laughing afterward, saying, "But I won that fight." From the beginning, Megan had been considered a suspect in the case. In fact, she had already been arrested in 1990 in connection with Justin's death, but was quickly released because of a lack of physical evidence. And that lack of evidence continued to be a major obstacle decades later, as the recent arrests relied mainly on circumstantial details, with the main pieces of evidence coming from the news footage taken during the initial search. They pointed out a number of strange behaviors from Victor Turner, most notably how he seemed to find his son almost immediately entering the camper and going directly to the cabinet where Justin had been hidden, as if he already knew exactly where to look. Observers also noted that Victor did not rush to check on Justin's condition or attempt to help him. Instead, he stepped back, assuming without hesitation that his son was already dead, and informed those nearby of the discovery. Shortly afterward, he allegedly asked a detective what would happen if a family member had committed the crime, posing the question even before it was revealed that Justin had been murdered. The sheriff later commented about the footage. "You look at it, you look at the actions, you look at the body language. I'll let the people draw their own conclusions." On top of this, he also recalled that immediately after the body was found, Victor and Megan refused to speak to detectives and never once called to check on the investigation for the entire 35 years, with the sheriff saying, "Nobody that I'm aware of from any of the family has ever heard from them again. I never got one phone call. Not one phone call from his daddy or stepmother. What are y'all doing about my son's death? Not one." Watching the moment Victor found his son, knowing the context, is indescribably disturbing. The fact that it took 35 years for any arrests to be made was baffling, to say the least. But things were about to get a whole lot more shocking.
We requested that the charges against Megan and Vic be dismissed. We were very fortunate today that we got a copy of the order from the judge dismissing the charges against both Megan and Vic.
On June 7th, 2024, months after their arrest, Victor and Megan were released from prison and all charges against them were dropped. The judge cited a lack of any new, conclusive physical evidence, as well as the fact that nearly 20 people who were initially involved in the case, including witnesses and those who provided key testimony, had since passed away. The judge concluded that it was now impossible to get the full story. And watching the footage now, we may never truly know whether Victor had simply discovered his son or his victim. In 1992, the BBC broadcast a program that reportedly caused children to vomit, grown men to soil themselves, and even sent some pregnant women into early labor. But most disturbingly, it may have also driven one young man to take his own life. It was Halloween night, 1992. Across the UK, people were just returning home and settling in for the evening, many of them flipping through their televisions in search of something spooky to match the occasion, only to stumble upon a rather unexpected program from an even more unlikely source, the BBC. The network was airing a brand new special called Ghost Watch, a bold and experimental broadcast led by renowned BBC presenter Michael Parkinson and a small team of reporters who set out to capture undeniable proof that ghosts were real, and to heighten the suspense, they would attempt to do it live on air. At the time, this was something truly unheard of, especially from the BBC, a network known for its polished reporting and reputation as one of the most trustworthy broadcasters in the country. And making things even more interesting, they weren't going to be doing their investigation at a well-known haunted destination, but rather a simple suburban home. The home was occupied by a single mother and her two daughters, who claimed they were being tormented by a violent, malevolent entity they called Mr. Pipes. The nickname came from the loud, metallic banging noises that echoed throughout the house, which the mother initially dismissed as the home's old plumbing. Her name was Pamela Early, and she lived there with her daughters, Suzanne and Kim. For months, the family had been pleading for help, reaching out to local journalists and reporters, only to be mocked, ignored, or labeled as delusional. And so this was their moment to finally prove to the world that what they were experiencing was in fact real. But as the program got underway, most of the audience watching at home quickly felt the exact opposite way. Inside the house, reporter Sarah Green witnessed little to no activity during the first hour, while Michael Parkinson and a skeptic brought on for commentary grew increasingly unconvinced, suggesting that whatever had been happening in the house before was likely psychological rather than supernatural. And then things got even worse. During one of the supposed disturbances, Sarah caught Suzanne secretly creating the sounds attributed to Mr. Pipes by tapping a hammer against the wall, effectively destroying the family's entire story in a single moment.
Quite extraordinary. We set out to catch a ghost, and sadly, very sadly, what we witnessed was a remarkable exposure of a hoax.
Let's not be too hasty.
Oh, come on, Doctor, please.
It was, by all accounts, a disaster. Yet, just as Ghostwatch seemed ready to collapse entirely, its final hour would take a turn that no one could have anticipated.
Oh, Suzanne? Suzanne, are you okay? It's all right, love. Oh, don't get upset, love. Your mum's here. Oh, dear God. Oh, delusion.
Suddenly, the camera cuts to Suzanne, lying motionless in her bedroom. Her body is covered in deep scratches, and her breathing is shallow and erratic. Panic erupts among the crew, thrusting the broadcast into complete chaos.
We can stay.
We will stay with you. What was that?
Where are we going?
Just outside.
Where are we going?
Come on.
As they rush to help her, loud metallic banging echoes through the house once again. Only this time, every single person in that house was accounted for. And then, in one of the show's most chilling moments, the camera pans to reveal Suzanne hiding behind a couch.
Susie. Stop it! Stop it, Susie!
She suddenly begins speaking in a deep, guttural voice, completely unrecognizable, as though something else were speaking through her. In case you haven't caught on yet, Ghostwatch is a work of fiction. It was not a live paranormal investigation at all, but a meticulously staged, pre-recorded film. Everyone on screen was an actor, except for Michael Parkinson, who was indeed a real BBC presenter, used to make the whole thing look more believable. In fact, the broadcast had even opened with a short disclaimer clearly stating that what viewers were about to see was fictional.
Now on BBC One, Screen One presents an unusual and sometimes disturbing film marking Halloween. Using the modern idiom of the outside broadcast, Michael Parkinson, Sarah Green, Mike Smith and Craig Charles star in Ghostwatch.
But there was just one problem. Most people didn't see that warning. And because the production was designed to mimic the BBC's usual live reporting style, millions of viewers simply took it at face value. They genuinely believed they were watching a horrifying supernatural event unfold in real time. And it didn't stop there. I won't spoil the rest of the movie, but after this point, everything spirals into absolute chaos, culminating in a shocking revelation that through the program, the hosts had inadvertently conducted one massive seance, allowing a demonic entity to escape its confines and spread through the television signal itself to the viewers watching. According to the movie's lore, every single one of the 11 million viewers watching at home was now susceptible to possession. The film ends with Michael Parkinson seemingly overtaken by that same dark force.
When you assure me that my wife is safe,
we haven't got an emergency generator. Whether or not we can bring it in, I don't know. What a curious Ruiqi. Round and round the garden, like a teddy bear.
And then the screen cuts to black and Ghostwatch is over. Within minutes of the broadcast ending, BBC phone lines were flooded with more than 30,000 calls, most of them from horrified, hysterical viewers. People were genuinely terrified, convinced that what they had just seen was real. Even Michael Parkinson's own mother called the studio in panic, fearing that her son had been possessed. To add to the terror, moments later, the BBC's phone lines collapsed under the weight of these never-ending callers. To those already trapped in panic, this wasn't a technical difficulty. They believed Mr. Pipes had done it himself, cutting off their cries for help as revenge for daring to watch the show. The stories that poured in that night were unbelievable. One woman reportedly demanded compensation for a new pair of trousers after her husband quite literally defecated himself out of fear. 2 young boys were later treated by doctors for symptoms resembling post-traumatic stress disorder. But among the millions who watched Ghostwatch that Halloween night, one viewer would take it harder than anyone else. His name was Martin Denham, an 18-year-old from England who watched the broadcast with his parents and younger sister. Throughout the show, Martin's behavior became increasingly strange. He curled into a ball, unresponsive, with his eyes glued to the screen. His family described him as if he had been hypnotized, completely transfixed by what he was seeing. Now, Martin had a mild learning disability that occasionally affected his emotions, but this was something entirely different. After the show ended, he became consumed by paranoia. He began hearing strange noises around the house, loud creaks and bangs his parents insisted were just the water pipes. But to Martin, that explanation only made things worse. It was the same excuse Pamela Early had used on Ghostwatch to explain her own haunting. To him, this was proof that Mr. Pipes had somehow escaped the broadcast and was now inside his home. Over the next few days, his fear spiraled out of control. He refused to sleep in the dark. He begged to switch bedrooms, terrified that the ghost was hiding in his walls. 5 days after Ghostwatch aired, Martin Denham would take his own life. He left behind a single note that read, "Please don't worry. If there are ghosts, I will now be one, and I will always be with you as one." Ghostwatch was created to deliver a horror experience that felt as real as possible, and tragically, it succeeded a little too well. The backlash was immediate and severe. The BBC quickly pulled the program from circulation and banned it from ever airing again in the UK. To this day, it remains one of the most controversial broadcasts in television history, an experiment that blurred the line between fiction and reality so convincingly that it crossed a line no one expected.